So growing up, I really wasn't a big stealth game kid. I wasn't good at them. I think the first stealth game I ever played was Tenchu, and it absolutely destroyed me. So for years, I just never touched Metal Gear. My dad wasn't big into stealth games either, so we just never had them around. Then I got to high school, and some of my friends were talking about how cool they were, so I decided to check them out, and I played them all in order. And it instantly clicked with me. The storytelling, obviously, but also how much was always happening mechanically. Even the smaller moments in these games, they feel like they've got a lot of layers to them. And I know Kojima's style isn't for everybody, but for the people it hits, it really hits. This series is special to a lot of people, to me. And when we get to Snake Eater, for the year it came out, this game was doing some insane things. If you've been around for the streams, you've probably already seen my reactions to realizing what all this game was pulling off. But I'm not here to just praise the game. I want to look at it from a neutral stance and really see all the things it was doing.
Excellent job.
So, what was Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater?
Think you can pull the trigger?
So, to really understand why Metal Gear Solid 3 exists the way it does, we gotta put ourselves back in that early 2000s Kojima headspace for a second. Because by the time MGS3 is happening, Kojima had already pushed the series into a place where expectations were extremely high, and he talks about all this very directly. He basically says MGS2 had a lot packed into it, and the feeling going into MGS3 was back to the origin, keeping it simple, and focusing on that original sneaking mission flavor. And I really like that phrasing a lot, back to the origin, because it tells us the goal was pretty clear. He was trying to bring the core of Metal Gear back into focus, and then build forward from that. That's where the jungle choice really starts to make sense. He says an infiltration mission starts out in the wilderness, and he wanted people moving through these natural areas, hills, mountains, that kind of terrain. He also ties it to Snake's hard-boiled vibe, and says survival belongs there. So when we look at this game's setting, this Cold War jungle is a decision that forces the whole game to behave differently. Having a facility gives you that structure for free. The jungle makes you earn that structure. It makes the environment part of the game design. And he talks about the technical side as well. He brings up something that's pretty easy to forget now. Jungles were hard to do at the time, because hardware limitations made dense vegetation a nightmare. He says creators all over the world had tried, and it hadn't really worked the way people wanted. He framed this game as them trying to break through that. He even mentions they were building a new engine to get there. That's a pretty big deal, because it tells you the stakes here were pretty high. If the jungle doesn't work, the whole identity doesn't work. The entire pitch here collapses. And another interesting thing is how hands-on he was compared to the other stuff happening at the time. In this same interview, he explains that there were multiple projects at the same time. But for Metal Gear Solid, he was hands-on across everything. The game plan, the game design, directing, basically the full steering wheel here. And then later in that conversation, he admits something else that's pretty telling. After Metal Gear Solid 2, he didn't originally want to direct another one. He had tried to hand it off. He says he gave the plan to the team and just asked who wanted it, but nobody stepped up. And the reason that matters is because the game's system was changing drastically with the jungle concept, and it felt risky to hand a shift like that to someone else. So you have this big mix of things happening at once. A creative, back-to-the-origin mindset trying to recenter everything, a setting choice that exists for mechanical reasons, this big technical challenge that needed new solutions on PS2 hardware, and a leadership situation where Kojima felt like he had to personally drive it because the shift was big enough that handing it off just didn't feel responsible. And then there's even another layer on it that's pretty wild. Years later, Kojima talked about how some of MGS3's survival mechanics were divisive internally. The way he describes it, a lot of staff wanted something more straightforward, and he claims only a few people were fully backing those survival editions at the time. I think that's super interesting because it frames Metal Gear Solid 3's direction as something that had to be defended, even inside the team. And if you want proof that they were really chasing a physical world feeling, Wired had a piece back in 2004 describing Metal Gear Solid 3 as his most immersive world yet. They talked about the environments affecting play in very literal ways. Stuff like leaving wet footprints, sneezing after the rain, the actual ecosystem being usable, food spoiling over time, and recovery being tied to the PS2's internal clock. I'm not going to go super deep on all those mechanics here, we'll get to that later, but for this part, that's the point. This game was built around the idea that the world should push back in a really physical way. The setting, the jungle, all of that was the design. So when we ask, why does Metal Gear Solid 3 exist? Kojima wanted to recenter the series around the core sneaking identity. And he wanted to move that identity into a place that demanded new rules. And once you pick a jungle, you're basically committing to survival, to improvisation, and to building an engine that can sell that environment without falling apart. So the jungle here has this weird effect where you stop thinking about it as scenery almost immediately. Because the second you're actually in it, your eyes start scanning the whole area without you really even meaning to. You're taking in the shape of the room, where cover is, where ground opens up, where you could be exposed and where the actual terrain patterns change. You'll walk into a section and it feels calm for a second. Then you move forward and the layout changes the whole situation. The ground drops and the angle changes, a slope nudges you into a different direction, and you end up adjusting constantly, even if you don't think of it as adjusting. So it's more than just moving through the map. You're reading what the area is doing and making decisions from that. I think of each screen as a room, and here is where that idea makes sense to me. The game is basically built on these contained chunks of jungle, that each have their own little problems. You step into a new area, and it's like the game is handing you a situation. Sometimes they're wide and open, and the challenge is that everything feels exposed. Other times it's more dense vegetation, and you end up second-guessing what you can actually see. Sometimes it's split up by elevation, and you're thinking about how you cross without giving up your position. And there's almost always guard patrols cutting the room up in these little sections, so you have to learn their patrol routes, having to decide when and where you want to commit, because once you move into certain directions, you're kind of just in it. And the way you can tell that this is intentional is that the game keeps introducing these areas almost like they're set pieces. There is a review back when this launched that described it as having some kind of tactical twist to basically every new area or encounter. And that really hit me because it's exactly the feeling I got when playing it. You enter a new room, you pause and scan the area, and your brain starts asking what the catch is with this one.
Get your hands off me.
That's pretty much the basic rhythm of the game. It works because it's chopped up into these manageable sections where the geography actually matters. Each section has boundaries and shapes, asks you to make choices based on what you can read. And it gives you options. A lot of these areas let you approach them from different angles. You'll notice a route that keeps you lower and tucked away, another route that gets you to the far side quicker, but it asks you to cross ground that feels a lot riskier. And even with the guards, you could try to go loud and then hide away, or try to use distractions with spoiled food or magazines or other things so you can just slip by.
I found some food.
My go-to is just staying low on the ground and taking each one out with the tranq gun. What I like is how none of these options feel like the correct one. They just feel like decisions you're making based on what you're comfortable with and what you're trying to do in that moment. And the more you play, the more natural this all feels. You could see it in the streams for this. The first night was pretty rough. I was getting detected in almost every single room. And then a few nights later, after I had some time learning what the jungle was asking of you, I was making it through multiple rooms in a row with no one even knowing I was there.
And it's just that easy, folks.
With all of this, the game is teaching you a visual language. You start picking up what the game cares about just by moving through it, where a situation can flip on you fast if you rush it, how each room wants you to slow down and actually read it. You can learn pieces of all this through codec calls, but most of it comes from experience. There aren't really any big moments stopping to explain it in detail. The jungle teaches you. You feel it and learn when a route or strategy works, and you definitely feel it when it doesn't. After a while, you can tell what a room is asking for just by looking at its shape. So once you've been in the jungle long enough, you start treating each section like its own little puzzle to solve. Hey, just real quick, if you made it this far into the video, thank you for hanging out with me for a bit. If you're enjoying it, consider subbing. There's a lot of content already on the channel like this, and there's always more coming. Consider dropping a like and leaving a comment as well. Let me know what you thought about Metal Gear Solid 3. Let me know what you think about the series in general. Are you a big Kojima fan, or did his stuff never really work with you? I love seeing your all's memories. But let's get back into the video and dive into the mechanics, because there is a lot. Alright, so now that we've got a feel for how the jungle itself works, this is where the game starts showing why people still talk about it the way they do. Because once you're in it, you realize how much of this game is built on overlapping systems. The jungle's doing work, the stealth is doing work, and then you've got all these other systems sitting on top of that, pulling on the same decisions. The game is basically a stack. Stealth, camouflage, stamina and food, injury treatment, tools and CQC, the way enemies respond to things you do. There's even a sabotage side of it, where you can mess with how an area functions before you ever even move through it. And what makes it feel so deep is how often the game lets you solve the same situation through different parts of that stack. Like I mentioned before, you can just clear a room and move carefully through it. But you also might clear it by planning ahead, or by controlling the space in general, or you might go in after you've already shifted the situation in your favor. A lot of the time, it ends up being a blend of all that, and you don't even realize how many layers you're using until you look back at what you just did. So for this next part, we're going layer by layer and just talking through what each system changes in the moment, what kinds of decisions it creates, what it pushes you towards, and how it starts shaping the way you think when you enter a new area. And once you see this whole stack clearly, the rest of the game kind of just locks in, especially when we get to the bosses, because those fights feel like the game checking whether you've actually learned how to use all of this. Alright, so camo is one of the first systems in the game that you really start to learn. It keeps a camo index on the screen the whole time, so you're always getting this little readout while you play. And it's laid out in a way that's pretty easy to understand at a glance. There's face paint and there's a uniform, so you always know what you've got on and you always know how it's doing. And the thing that really makes it click is how often that number reacts. You'll watch it change based on where you are, but also what you're doing. Posture and movement matters here. You can see the number respond from crawling, crouching, standing, running, all that stuff. So it becomes this ongoing feedback loop where the game is basically telling you in real time how clean you're blending in. And once you've spent a bit of time with it, you start noticing another layer underneath that. The terrain shifts a lot in this game, even inside what feels like one continuous stretch. You'll be heading towards something and you can already see the ground change 2 or 3 times on the way there. Different vegetation or shades of grass, mud, wood, rock, or these little pockets where the environment just look different. So you start anticipating what you're going to want on before you even hit it. The numbers and percentages means you don't have to treat the camo like homework. You can always just check and react. But your brain still starts recognizing patterns. You start getting a feel for what works in thicker vegetation versus different shades of grass. Like tiger stripe and leaves start making sense in different shades of green. Then you hit browner ground like mud or wood, and the camos that blend into that start feeling obvious, like squares or tree bark. And then there's the weather layer, which I think is one of the coolest parts of it. The game even has a raindrop camo that's built for rainy conditions. So the environment changing state actually matters in the same way the terrain does. So by this point, the camo is really turned into your rhythm of playing the game. Just this quick check, quick adjustment, keep playing rhythm. It's one of those systems where the game teaches you through repetition because it keeps the feedback visible. And then it goes even deeper because camo isn't only about blending here. There are these special camos you can earn by doing certain things, like taking out bosses non-lethally, and those start acting like tools, stuff with effects, with trade-offs. Spider is a good example because it keeps your camo index super high even when you're standing, but it drains your stamina really hard. So it becomes something that you have to use with intention. You can't just set in it all day. Hornet Stripe is another fun one. It lets you interact with hornets in a way that's just super Metal Gear Solid. So now you've got standard camo as your day-to-day layer, and you've got these weird specialist camos that change how certain situations behave. And on top of that, you have disguises. The scientist and maintenance outfit is the ones that always stick with me because it shows how much the game cares about social logic. The guards will buy it, but other scientists or the maintenance people get suspicious. You can be walking around completely fine, and then you get close to the wrong person and suddenly it's a problem because you're not someone they recognize. So you're getting this little reminder that camouflage isn't only visual in this game, sometimes it's contextual. And when you put all this together, that's why the camo system feels like more than a simple stealth feature. You've got a constant readout, you've got terrain and weather changing what the best answer is, and then you've got reward camos that add utility and trade-offs, and disguises that work until the wrong person is close enough to question it. So by the time you're comfortable with it, you're glancing at the index the same way you'd glance at ammo. It's just part of how you stay locked in.
Brace yourself. Excellent job.
So the next layer is what happens after you've been spotted. The guards have different aware states, and once the area goes into that alerted mode, you can really feel the energy shift. Patrols get heavier, movement increases, the whole space starts behaving like it's really looking for you. And that's where a lot of the pressure comes from, because it turns into an active hunt. You end up having to disappear for a minute and let the timer run down, find a safe spot, stay quiet, and just wait it out. Then you start realizing how easy it is for that clock to get kicked right back up again. A knocked out guard or a body gets found and the alert state spikes all over again. So you start paying attention to what you leave behind. You start thinking about whether you can afford to leave evidence sitting around, because the room can get reactivated without a warning. And even when things calm down, the tension really sticks around for a bit. The area feels awake after it's been triggered. And most of this part will feel familiar if you played the earlier games. The difference here is just how it sits on top of everything else we're juggling in the jungle. So the next one is food and stamina, and that system kind of just sets under everything you're doing in the game. Stamina affects Snake in some real ways once it starts dropping. His stomach will start growling, and the guards can hear that. Aiming gets shakier as it gets lower. You can feel the character losing steadiness, and it changes how confident you are doing anything that requires precision. It also impacts recovery. When stamina is low, Snake heals slower, so it really affects how quickly you can get back to normal after something goes wrong. And there's another little detail that matters a bit more than you'd expect. The same stamina bar doubles as your oxygen when you're swimming, so the lower your stamina is, the shorter you can hold your breath. And if you let stamina drain all the way, the game makes it obvious you've just pushed Snake too far. Everything just starts feeling harder. You don't get the same clean control, you're fighting the character a little bit because he's depleted. So keeping stamina up becomes part of staying functional. And the game gives you a lot of ways to do that. You'll find food items like rations, ramen, and other stuff out in the world. You can also hunt, and I think it goes way deeper than most games like this would bother with. Snakes, fish, frogs, birds, pretty much anything alive, even down to tiny stuff like spiders. The jungle ends up feeling stocked, and you start noticing what's around you because it can actually matter later. There's even another layer that makes the whole thing feel personal to Snake. Snake has preferences. He'll try food and react to it. Some things he likes, some things he doesn't. The more he likes what he's eating, the more stamina you get back. And over time, you start learning what works best for him. You start keeping an eye out for the foods that consistently give you a good return. You're literally developing his food palette. And the jungle also has the other side of that coin, where food can really mess you up. Poison dart frogs, certain mushrooms, meat left out too long until it rots. There are plenty of ways to make yourself sick if you're not paying attention. Food poisoning can kick in, and now you're dealing with a problem you created because you grabbed the wrong thing or ate it at the wrong time. So food turns into this constant background layer, staying topped off, watching what you're eating, and making sure you're not setting yourself up for a mess later. And that's a perfect bridge into the next system, because once the game starts putting consequences on his body, it doesn't stay limited to hunger. It goes straight into injuries and recovery.
I'm famished.
So the cure system is where the game really commits to the body idea. Because you can carry a bunch of healing items in this game, and you'll still end up in situations where your health isn't coming back the way you normally expect for a game. You get injured, and a chunk of your health bar will get stuck in red until you deal with whatever happened to you. A cut, a burn, a broken bone, a bullet wound, each one comes with its own problem attached, and the game wants you to treat that problem directly. And that's what makes this system really memorable to me. You're opening the cure menu, looking at Snake and figuring out what's wrong with him, and then you treat it in a way that really makes sense for what happened. A bullet wound is a good example. You have to dig the bullet out with his knife, disinfect it, use styptic to slow the bleeding, and bandage it. It's a process, and the process is the point. It makes the injury feel more real. Everything has their own routine. Cuts need stitches, burns have ointment, and broken bones need splints. All the items feel like they belong to the wound. And the game really puts these injuries in front of your face. You can go into the x-ray screen and literally see what's happening. There's a bullet lodged in him, you can see the broken bone, so you're never guessing what's wrong with him. And then the game starts doing something fun where it uses these systems in specific moments to add a bit more flavor to it. The fear fight is a pretty good example because he's shooting you with arrows. You'll come out of that with them sticking in Snake's body, and the treatment ends up feeling a lot like the bullet wound, except it looks different. You're looking at the arrow, you're pulling it out. It's one of those moments where the game makes you feel the damage. The end has a fun one also. You can end up with darts stuck in you, and because they're tranq darts, your stamina drops until you deal with it. So now the cure menu becomes urgent. You have to do it because the fight is still happening and Snake is actively getting dragged down until you take care of the issue. And one of the coolest uses of the cure system is right after Snake gets captured. You lose your equipment and you're left with basically nothing. They give you a fork to eat with. Then if you go into the cure menu and actually examine Snake, you can find a transmitter inside him. You can dig it out with the fork, and that choice affects the game. If you leave it in, you're getting tracked, so you run into heavier guard presence up ahead. That's such a Kojima thing. The game gives you a cheap little item, hides something in your body, and then rewards you for even thinking to check. And then there's the leeches, which is another pretty cool one. You get into swampy areas and leeches can attach to Snake, and you can actually see them stuck to him. You go into the cure menu and deal with it. You can use your cigar to burn them off. It's gross, but it's memorable. And it makes the environment feel like it's doing something to you the whole time. So every injury turns into a little moment where you have to slow down and pay attention. You feel the cost in time and focus. You feel it because you're taking your hands off the mission for a second to keep Snake functional. And when you stack that on top of stamina, food, and all the other systems we talked about, it really starts making sense why the game feels the way it does. The game keeps asking you to maintain a body inside of this hostile area. So once all the survival stuff's in place, this is where the game starts handing you a lot of options. And the reason it all stays pretty readable is because most of the gear comes with some kind of limit that naturally shapes how you can use them. One of the examples is the vision gear. There's thermal goggles, night vision goggles, they're super useful tools, and they run on battery while you use them. So you end up flipping them on just for moments you need them, then saving the battery for later. The same thing with sensor tools, stuff like the active sonar or the motion sensor. It burns through battery, so you start treating it like something that you just pull out for a quick check and then you put it away. The whole battery idea is one of the small ways the game keeps your tool use intentional. You're always choosing when a gadget's worth it. And then you've got the weapon side of it, which is where your playstyle really starts showing up. There's plenty of lethal options, pistols, sniper rifles, machine guns, all kinds of stuff depending on what you like using. There's also a really strong non-lethal lane that the game supports all the way through. The MK22, which is the tranquilizer dart pistol, becomes the workhorse for a lot of people, including myself. The Mosin sniper rifle fits into that same lane as well, but it's really loud. And then you get into the weirder non-lethal options that feel like classic spy gear, like fake cigarettes with a knockout spray in it, or a handkerchief treated to drop someone up close. And those close-range tools blend right into CQC, which sits underneath everything. Because CQC gives you a lot of ways to handle guards without turning it into a gunfight. There's holds, throws, interrogations, counters, stuff that lets you take control of a situation in a tight space. It also turns guards into information, because once you've got someone grabbed, you can pull intel, reposition, and decide what kind of run you're doing. When you zoom out with that, you've got battery-based gadgets, lethal weapons, non-lethal weapons, and a whole close-quarter system that ties into stealth and information. And over time, you start building your own approach out of that mix. Some people lean on gadgets, or non-lethal, or CQC. Some go loud. The game has room for all of it.
You're better than I remember.
Alright, so the last layer in this stack is communication, the codec calls. There are a few moments where the game forces a call on you, but outside of that, you can call people constantly, like pretty much in every area. Certain buildings inside the areas, during situations, after situations. And depending on when and where you call, you can get completely different conversations. Sometimes it's plot, sometimes it's guidance, or just straight up tips. Sometimes it's Kojima just being Kojima. You can call and get info on foods, weapons, bosses, survival stuff. Little details you'd never notice on your own. What I love is the game never puts a giant arrow in your head telling you to do this. It just rewards curiosity. If you're the kind of person who checks in, the game keeps handing you little advantages. And one of the biggest ones for me is that some of these calls turn into side objectives that can change how entire areas play. There's a moment where if you call the Major inside a supply room, he'll explain what the place really means. Those supply rooms are logistics. If you destroy an ammo supply, guards in that area end up having less firepower. You can feel that later. You're changing what they can bring to the fight. The bigger one is the food supply. If you destroy a food supply, the guards in that area start starving, so you'll see them get sluggish and drag. You might even catch them falling asleep, and that opens the door for some really creative tactical stuff that only exists because the game is tracking it. You can plant rotted food or poison food, then you just let the system do what it's going to do. And the reason this is such a big deal is it shifts the mindset. You're shaping what an area turns into and deciding what kind of resistance you want to deal with later. And you're doing it through information you only get if you're actually talking to your team. And you've got the other side of codec calls, which is the personality stuff. There are tons of jokes and weird little Easter eggs, little moments that exist purely because Kojima wanted them there.
Me for a second.
Sure.
Did you just hear that?
Yeah. There's no way
way eating a bioluminescent mushroom would cause your batteries to recharge.
What do you think it means?
Beats me. Maybe it's all in his mind.
And one of the bigger ones is paramedic in movies.
You ever heard of
After pretty much every save, you can call her and she'll tell you about a movie in detail. And I swear, it feels like Kojima just wanted an excuse to recommend his favorite films to his fans, because it's always in that lane of spy stuff or espionage and sci-fi, the exact DNA of Metal Gear Solid.
Scientists are investigating a place deep in the Amazon called the Black Lagoon, and they get picked off one after the other by this fishman thing.
And then there's one codec moment that's still crazy to me. Right after Snake gets captured, if you save in your cell and call paramedic, she'll talk about Dracula. And Snake is scared of vampires. He talks about how whenever someone brings up vampires around him, he has nightmares.
And a gust of wind fills the cell.
Come on, I don't want to hear this.
And there, standing before Renfield in human form was
Dracula.
So you do that call, you save, and exit the game, then you come back and reload your save. And you don't load into Metal Gear. You load into something completely different. A little hack-and-slash monster game. You're playing Snake's Vampire Nightmare. And I thought about that happening back in 2004. Somebody reaches that cell segment, saves their game, takes a break after one of the most brutal stretches in the whole story. Then they come back the next day and hit continue, and the game drops them into that. No warning at all, just full, what is going on here? And then Snake wakes up, and if you call paramedic again, he'll explain he had a nightmare. That whole sequence is such a perfect example of what makes this layer special. The codec is so much. It's gameplay, it's secrets, side objectives, it's personality. It's the game rewarding you for treating your team like they're actually part of the mission.
See the leeches?
Leeches?
Yeah, you've got leeches all over you.
So after you spend all this time learning the jungle, learning the toolset, getting comfortable with the survival side of it, the bosses show up and they function like skill checks almost. Because like we've just went over, the game gives you a ridiculous amount of options. From vision gear to lethal and non-lethal weapons, all kinds of close range control, and just weird things Kojima wanted to add because it would be funny. And then all the survival stuff sitting underneath that. So the game needs moments where it can actually force you to use those options under pressure. So the bosses become these situations where the room is asking something specific from you. Sometimes it's being aware or being patient or just managing a fight while you're dealing with the status problems at the same time. Sometimes just using a tool you've been carrying around and never touch until the game gives you a reason. And what keeps it from feeling random is that you're still using the same mindset the jungle taught you. You're still reading, adjusting, still making little decisions that stack up into control. So I really don't think of the bosses as a separate part of the game. They feel like the game grabbing you by the collar for a second and going, alright, show me what you can do with everything you've learned. Alright, so it's time to get into the story. And this game has a ton going on. So if I tried to hit every detail, it would balloon this video into something crazy. So what I'm going to do here is just hit the main storyline, the big moments, the important characters, and the parts that really set up the ending. So if you haven't played it and you care about spoilers, this is the warning for that. Snake Eater starts in a pretty specific place and time. The Cold War tension is already sitting there in the background, and the whole setup is built around one problem. The Soviets have a weapon scientist named Sokolov, and he's tied to this nuclear project called the Shagohod. The US wants him extracted before that turns into a real-world nightmare. That's the Virtuous mission, the first one in the game. Snake's job in this one is pretty straightforward. Get in, find Sokolov, and bring him out.
Freeze!
His major, Zero, and paramedic are supporting him over radio. And the boss is there too, the person who trained him. The one person in the world that he trusts on that level. Then everything goes sideways in one moment. Snake actually does find Sokolov pretty early. Ocelot shows up trying to take him back. And right as it feels like Snake might get off clean, the boss shows up, beats him down and defects, right there in the open. Over to Volgan's side, she takes Sokolov back with her, and then Volgan launches a Davy Crockett nuke that detonates on Soviet soil. That nuke changes the entire situation instantly. Because now the US has an American weapon going off in Russia, and the Soviets want answers. And one bad move turns this into a much bigger problem. So the US responds by sending Snake back in under a new operation, Operation Snake Eater. The objectives get a lot heavier. Eliminate Volgan, recover the remaining nuke, rescue Sokolov again, and then the one thing that hangs over the whole game, kill the boss.
go home.
So once Snake is back on the ground, the story starts layering in the people around him. Eva shows up as this ally inside the jungle. Ocelot keeps circling Snake, half rival, half something else. As Snake pushes towards Groznygrad, you meet Granin, and he fills in a really important piece of context. Volgin wants more than power. He wants a weapon that completely defines the era. Granin had his own ideas, but the Shagohod is the one that's getting the attention. And it's tied directly to Sokolov.
Mobile nuclear missile system. A bipedal tank.
A bipedal tank?
That's where the mission kind of starts narrowing again. Sokolov is being held in Groznygrad, and the Shagohod is basically the prize Volgin is building his whole identity around. From there, the game just keeps tightening the situation around Snake. You're pushing through the Cobra units as you get closer, you're linking up with Eva again, you're infiltrating Groznygrad, and inside that base, the mission starts feeling like it's on the edge of slipping out of your hands. Sokolov is being forced deeper into the Shagohod's work. Volgin is escalating everything, and then Snake is just trying to hold the line. And then Snake gets captured.
Stay out of this.
Volgin tortures him, and you start getting pulled into the bigger thing sitting underneath all this, the Philosopher's Legacy. This massive hidden fund tied to powerful people across multiple countries. The microfilm pointing to that money becomes the piece of gravity in the whole story, because now it isn't only about stopping a weapon. Whoever gets control of the legacy gets leverage of the world. During that whole torture stretch, Snake loses his right eye while saving Eva, and then gets thrown into a cell. He escapes, and the story gets pretty surreal for a minute after that. You get the encounter with the Sorrow. It's one of those sections that makes everything feel really heavy, even if you don't stop to analyze it in the moment. And this stretch is also really cool, because the way it plays out is determined by how many people you've killed. All the soldiers and guards that you've been killing throughout the game will show up in this stretch. So if you've been going quiet and just knocking them out, it'll be a bit easier. But then things start ramping back up. Snake links back up with Eva, gets explosives, returns to Groznygrad, and plants C3. And the whole situation turns into a chain reaction. Volgin is still moving the Shagohod, Eva gets exposed, the boss is getting ordered around in full view of everyone. Snake is basically forced into a final push where everything is happening at once. Escaping, being pursued, destruction, survival. The Shagohod chase is the mission climax of the story. Snake and Eva get away on the motorcycle, and Volgin chases them using the Shagohod. Snake destroys it, defeats Volgin, and the game clears the board enough to reach the part that the whole story has been dragging you toward. The lake.
There is no such thing, and never has been. And the reason is that our enemies are human beings like us. They can only be our enemies in relative terms. The world must be made whole again.
Snake meets the boss one last time. She talks to him about what she believes in, what she's endured, and what a soldier's life costs. Then the fight happens, and it lands the way it lands because you spent the entire game moving toward it. Whether you wanted to or not, Snake defeats her. She gives him the microfilm, she orders him to finish it.
Patriot.
Snake ends up killing her with her own gun. And after that, Snake and Eva escape. They spend the night together, and then Snake wakes up alone. Eva leaves behind a tape, and that's where the final truth comes out. Eva was sent to retrieve the Philosopher's Legacy from China. The boss's defection was part of her real mission the entire time. The nuke forced everything into a corner, and the US needed the boss to die publicly as a traitor so the world wouldn't explode. She kept the peace by sacrificing her name, her life, and her legacy. And then the part that kinda hurts is how cleanly everything just moves forward. Snake gets awarded the title of Big Boss for completing the mission.
I award you the title of Big Boss.
Then he visits her grave, and you can really feel what the story's saying. The mission succeeded, and the truth had to stay buried. And the person who held the whole thing together got remembered the wrong way.
Everything she did for her country. She sacrificed her life and her honor for her native land. She was a real hero. She was a true patriot.
So when you step back from the events of Snake Eater, the story lands because of what it asks people to carry. Snake goes in with a mission and a set of orders. By the time it's over, he's coming out with a title and a weight that will be on him forever. You can feel that in the ending. The last stretch should be a celebration. They stopped the end of the world, essentially. But it plays like someone finishing a job that really changed them, then having to stand there and accept what it cost. And the boss is the center of that feeling. Her story is built around a choice that never gets to be understood publicly. Everything she does gets filtered through what the world needs the story to be. Snake gets the closest view of who she really was. And even he has to live with the fact that the version of her the world remembers is the version that keeps the peace in place. That's where all this hurts in my opinion. Because the game takes words like loyalty and duty and makes them feel really heavy. It shows what happens when someone's identity turns into a tool, and shows how a person can be used as a solution, and then erased into a narrative they didn't choose. And the Cold War setting makes all that feel really grounded. The spies, the cover stories, the legacy, the layers inside layers, the double, triple, quadruple agents. It's a world built around control. Truth moves around depending on who needs it. People get renamed, reassigned, and rewritten. So by the time Snake reaches the end, the mission's finished, and the understanding is still sitting there with him. The salute at the grave feels like the moment everything kind of connects. He finally sees what she carried, and he's the one left holding it. That to me is why the story really sticks. It leaves you with the shape of the sacrifice, and it doesn't let you forget that the world moved on cleanly while the people inside it didn't.
In your memory. Not as a soldier, but as a woman. But she was forbidden to tell you herself.
So looking back at 2004 when this game came out, Snake Eater landed really big. People immediately treated it as a major PS2 release, and a lot of the early reviews read like they already knew it was going to be remembered. A lot of that praise comes down to how ambitious it felt for the time. Even if you strip away the Metal Gear hype and you just look at what the game was doing on a mechanical level, reviewers were picking up on how deliberate it was. One of the cleaner ways it got described back then was basically, the game doesn't waste your time, areas don't feel like filler. You keep moving from one scenario to the next, and there's almost always some kind of tactical twist baked into the next space or encounter. That was something critics called out pretty clearly at launch, and it's a huge part of why the game felt so engaging even when it slowed down. And then you've got the broader wow factor of how it presented itself. In 2004, a stealth game going into outdoor environments the way MGS3 did felt like a bigger swing than it sounds now. Reviews talked about the environments feeling larger, the sense of scale, the overall achievement of it. The vibe was very much, this is a big deal. And the story presentation was part of that too. The cinematic feel, the set piece structure, the way it staged major moments. People were praising it as a complete package. Now where it got interesting is the stuff people bumped into. The most common friction points at launch was the camera. That's the one you see over and over in 2004 reception. Reviewers described moments where the limited camera control could make you feel like you were moving without full information. Enemies hearing or seeing you from angles you couldn't easily see. So even when you're playing carefully, you can still get that frustration where you feel like the game is holding the view just slightly too tight for the kind of awareness it's asking from you. That was a pretty consistent thing. A lot of people considered it the main rough edge of the whole experience at the time. Then there was the PS2 era performance realities. Some places had said that the larger environments led to occasional frame rate dips. And you see complaints about load times as well. None of that stopped people from loving the game, but it was part of the reality of pushing the PS2 to do something this dense and this ambitious. And the last big split point was the system density. Some people were completely locked in on the survival layer and all the management that comes with it. Other people bounced off the fact that you had more to keep track of. The Camouflage system specifically had mixed reactions. Some people loved the added depth and the way it made the environment matter, and some people felt it added friction to a series they already saw as complex. And honestly, all that reception, the good and the bad, makes sense. Because MGS3 was committing to a specific kind of game. It wanted you to engage with it, pay attention, manage a lot of moving parts. That was always going to land differently depending on what somebody came to Metal Gear for. So when people talk about Snake Eater as a landmark, the reason makes sense pretty fast once you sit with the full package. It left people with a very clear memory of what it felt like to play. The jungle, the tension, the pace of moving through spaces that don't feel predictable. The way the game asks for attention, that feeling is a big part of why it stuck. Because that's the overall experience, it's not tied to one level or one section of the game. And even at the time, it was being framed that way. Konami highlighted it winning Best PS2 Game at Games Convention in Germany and tied that to new ideas and designs. And they specifically talked about the game creating an ecosystem where you're experiencing survival inside the world. That's a really telling way to summarize what the team thought they made. That ecosystem idea is a big part of the legacy. It's one of the earlier big stealth games that people remember for making the environment feel like it had rules you had to learn. The jungle carries the tone of the whole game. People remember the feeling of being out there, and a lot of the tension comes from that space itself. Then you've got the story sitting underneath all of it. It's the origin point for Big Boss, and it sets the emotional weight that a lot of the Metal Gear timeline keeps circling back to later. And even without going wider than this one game, the ending is the part that people carry. The lake, the final fight, the reveal of the graveyard. You can see why so many people describe finishing MGS3 as something that stays with them. Then you get to the parts that turned into cultural moments. The latter is one of the best examples because it's such a simple stretch of gameplay, and it still became iconic enough that people write about it like it's a scene everybody recognizes. The boss fight for the end is another one. People have told stories about that fight for years, especially the real-time system clock idea, because it feels like the kind of detail you only find when a game is comfortable being strange and committing to the bit.
I beg of you, grant me the strength to take this final prey.
And the reputation is held. You still see Snake Eater showing up on greatest games lists decades later, and it's usually sitting there without needing any explanation. So if I had to put a clean label on what Snake Eater is, it's a game built around survival as a feeling. Survival in the world, in the mission, survival in what the story asks of Snake by the end. And that's why it holds up. The game follows that idea all the way through and leaves you with it.
I can't.
Shoot me. You want to finish your mission, don't you? Then you'll have to shoot me. The spirit of the warrior.
And that's Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you for hanging out with me for a bit. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subbing. There's already a lot of content on the channel and there's always more coming. And if you want to help this video out, leave a like and drop a comment. Let me know what you thought about Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. And share it with somebody you think would enjoy it, and enjoy the save room. And I also want to give a huge shout out to all the channel members and to everyone who supported the MGS3 streams with super chats. I appreciate you all more than you know. But thanks again, and as always, I'll see y'all later.